So what I'm going to do in the course of this talk is just canvass the state-of-the-art in annotation and then focus a little bit on what it means for scholarly communication and a little bit more specifically on peer review and what some of the challenges and opportunities are in that space. So where I work right now is an organization called the Hypothesis Project. We're a 501c3 not-for-profit. We're primarily private foundation funded. And our goal, our purpose, is to create an open source software stack that supports annotation that would be used in many different kinds of contexts. So we're not in this to create clients at this point. We do see revenue opportunities later, but it's not our core thing. We want to expand the base of usage on the internet. So I'm not going to do a live demo because I'm not going to attempt the demo gods, and the time is too short. I just want to throw up some screens real quick, so if you haven't seen what annotation looks like, you can get a little bit of a feel for it as we go along. So this is shows a couple things. It's a simple annotation on the New York Times that I've done, and you can see it highlighted in yellow, or some derivative of yellow. And on the right, I've made a comment to what I've highlighted and then replied to that comment. So a very basic model. This is a right pane interface model of annotation. It could be designed in many different ways. The other thing that this shows, which isn't quite as obvious, is the second highlight towards the bottom of the screen, the cost of renewable energy ellipsis. That's actually what we call a highlight. In an annotation, you annotate a target in a document, like a journal article, and then you have an annotation body, which is what your comment is, the content that you're adding or linking to. And in this case, a highlight, you're actually not providing any additional content. So you're actually just serving this as a highlighter in a traditional yellow pen kind of way, and that's actually a fairly common way of using annotations, is to compile a bunch of clips. This is an annotation on a HTML-based article from a partner of ours, eLife Sciences. Again, pretty much replicates what you just saw on the prior screen. And I throw this up only because this is an annotation on the same article represented in PDF. Now, eLife does a very good job of using canonical URLs and rel links in their journals, or in their journal, to link together the PDF and HTML versions of their articles. What this means is that we can coalesce the annotations that users have made on PDF versions with the annotations that they've made on HTML versions. So whichever version you call up on your screen, you can see the combined annotations of those versions in the same space. For PDF, we're using PDF.js, I don't know how technical this group is, which is a JavaScript renderer that Mozilla is providing open source, and so that's increasingly being used to translate PDF documents as web documents that are native to the browser, and that enables a wide range of activities like this. This is just a quick shot, much like a Twitter stream, of an annotation stream. Shows you all the annotations that have been made recently using the Hypothesis stack, and we've provided some faceted search, simple faceted search, so you can see the various tags that are available to you there. We're also working on integrating not just text, but a wide variety of other media kinds of annotation. This is a simple image-based annotation. It's a little difficult to see because it's yellow and yellow, but this kind of source is being integrated directly into the software stack as well. Polygon support, so odd-shaped image definition will be incorporated soon too. Many groups are working on these kinds of features, and there's a broad open source community around it. So I'm going to define annotation very broadly for the purposes of this talk, because it's a useful hook into thinking about really what the larger term goals are. And the way that I'm going to define annotation is simply linking one concept online with another concept. Or actually, the concepts don't even need to be online per se, they just need to be referenceable using a standard URI. So this kind of symbology, if you will, of what an annotation means is very encompassing, but it includes many different use cases. And in fact, one interesting use cases in the humanities is if you point toward an illuminated manuscript, an image of a manuscript, then the body of an annotation can be the text of that illuminated manuscript or a translation of that text into English language, for example. So an annotation can carry different kinds of information in one sort of transmittable package. So in a manner, a lot of the activity that we do on the web is actually an annotation. When we transfer hyperlinks from one person to another, we're actually transmitting, ideally, some reference to a document to another person. And often we really want to highlight a particular part of a document to another user, and we're just not really able to do that right now in a very precise or parsimonious way. And then if you think about our own workflow in publishing, we're often using desktop production techniques where we're using non-web native ways of doing annotation, commenting, editing. And so this is sort of constrained within an older desktop model. So at its heart, the movement behind open annotation really is about taking that kind of activity and returning it back to the web, back into the browser, which is where we're spending more and more of our time, not just consuming material, but also, importantly, producing material, authoring material, and pushing it through our workflow. And there's precedent for this. This slide is a slide from 1993. It's a posting by Mark Andreessen on an early draft of Mosaic, one of the first instantiations of a modern browser, in which Mark included the opportunity to annotate web pages. And he's asking for guinea pigs on this functionality. Now, Mark did not have at that point something which is now relatively widely available, which is easily distributed, discoverable storage on the net. So when Mark conceived of this in '93, thinking about how to scale up storing annotations associated with documents on the web was something that was quite awkward. And now, after 20 years, we've been able to start making some advances in this space that make that kind of production much more straightforward. Currently, a lot of the open annotation projects right now are focused on building on top of software that was produced by the Open Knowledge Foundation called Annotator, which is now at a 2.0 release. This new release is very, very modular, and that means that you can incorporate different kinds of annotation activity very easily into software code. And in fact, this is so easy that at a recent conference that we held in San Francisco in April, the main engineer behind Annotator on the fly, on a live presentation, incorporated geolocational tag support into the software library. So this is pretty easy to do for software engineers now. In addition, there's been an open annotation community as part of the W3C, which is a very active community, the fourth most active in the W3C, that's created a data standard or specification for annotation that's now being serialized to support more streamlined web activity. This activity was funded in part by the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. There are also new frameworks emerging that take advantage of annotation in new ways. An example of that is work that is now located primarily at Stanford called Shared Canvas, which brings together images across disparate image repositories and allows scholars to annotate them in situ. Shared Canvas is also spearheading the creation of a new API for image interoperation. And this work too, by the way, was funded by the Mellon Foundation in part. Because of this burst of activity, the W3C is getting very, very interested in annotation. And recently, they convened a group in April that will start moving forward with a formal working group in annotation. This formal working group is open-doored to all publishers, to browser manufacturers, to anyone with a stake in the web, as is all W3 activity. And the intent is ultimately to bring us back to the promise of 1993 and restore annotation deep into the heart of the browser. The draft charter includes many elements of functionality that Hypothesis, Annotator, and the broader community have been working on to make annotation flexible and robust. So that it can withstand changes in document versioning, so that there's a standard vocabulary and so forth. But importantly is this last item on this slide, which is a client-side API for browsers that might ultimately bring annotation functionality back into the browser system, where now we have to provide the functionality through an extension. Now, there are certain requirements that I think are specific to scholarly communication that I'll touch on. Many of them are simply emphases of functionality that the broader community of web users would want as well, but there are also a few things that are, I think, particularly highlighting the kinds of work that we do. And a hat tip here to Anna Gerber at the University of Queensland for many of the text on these slides in a prior conference. So obviously in scholarly communication, we need every annotation to be uniquely citable or referenceable, at least as long as they're public in some fashion. We do need support for various types of authentication or authorization into annotation, supporting public, private, for example, closed peer review, or group-based annotations. We do need support for many differing media types, so images and video as well as text. And increasingly, we are looking at supporting scaling media objects like images that tile, using JPEG 2000 or viewers like OpenSeaDragon that allow researchers to zoom in on particular spots of an image. We need to be able to track the annotation as the image tiles up or down. In addition, as I alluded to earlier in the eLife example, we need to be able to coalesce annotations across multiple instantiations of a document. Sometimes the same published material lies in a couple of different repositories. We would want to bring activity together on the same location. There may be multiple representations, PDF, text, and there may be multiple versions of a particular document. And we would like to bring conversation across those versions together in one space. So for example, one of our other partners, Archive, the high energy physics repository at Cornell, preprint archive, they track published articles through a DOI. We would like to be able to track annotation or commentary activity that arises in the published version along with the activity that has arisen in the preprint version, so that an author or reader can focus in on the activity across the gamut of the document expressions. Now, peer review has, I think, some very interesting specific use cases, and I want to highlight those really quickly. Now, this I'll return to in a minute. This image is of a very early, I believe, 3rd century Christian text. And right in the middle of it, of course, you can perhaps ascertain, not very clearly, I'll get back to it in a second, an annotation, in essence, marginalia on one of the texts that's presented there. Now, annotations don't mean or are not intended to somehow eliminate peer review. Indeed, annotation is actually intended to augment or facilitate or help improve or streamline the process of peer review and the workflows that we are interested in. So some of the things that annotations may help are in facilitating portable or cascade peer reviews, where peer reviews are shared or float down across a family of journals. It may aid in the recognition of peer review as an element of scholarly contribution and acknowledge the work that scholars do, and perhaps even feed into promotion and tenure. From the journal perspective, it would facilitate workflow management because annotations are ultimately web addressable, and so they lend themselves toward greater management tools and services. Annotation can support open or staged peer review models where something might start out closed, then go open, then return closed, or eventually be published, or a subset of peer review be published. And of course, annotation can support post-publication commentary or post-publication peer review models. There are also some interesting derivative benefits. Scholars could conceivably self-manage their peer reviews across journals more easily. There may be better management of reviewer assignment by journals to articles. The possibility of creating the equivalent of an Erdos number, but so that you would know the relative distance as a contributor between authors and reviewers a little bit more easily because you're utilizing the network in order to maintain track of annotations and reviews. And then, of course, just the persistence and citability of peer reviews is available. Now, one critical part of annotations is integrating identity metrics and identity tokens into the peer review process. And as a result of that, the annotation community is working very closely with ISNI and particularly with ORCID to think about how to embed ORCID IDs into the annotation payload so that annotations used in the peer review context or other scholarly activity can be associated with the right persona. In fact, the activity with ORCID is now engaged in a joint work for peer review citation in a working group that process. And so we hope to see some results of that through this year, maybe by late summer. We'll start to see some output from that. Now, with identity, we also have to focus on reputation, and that is something that I think will emerge in the community in a broader sense. So what is the reputation of someone who's making annotations on a particular body of material? If you're a high-energy physicist making commentary in high-energy physics, you may have a very high reputation score. If you start making comments on articles published in planetary science, you may have perhaps a lesser reputation, but still a valid one. So, figuring out how to allow organizations to calculate their own reputation fabrics or algorithms is really important to us. We are not seeking to mandate this, simply to provide hooks that allow people to incorporate that kind of reputation calculation into online review systems. We also want to do a couple of other interesting things. We want to be able to support annotations to multiple targets so that a reviewer can say, in a document here and over here, the author is saying, or making such and such an argument. Similarly, we want to be able to point to arguments across multiple targets with a single comment, right? So somebody is making reference to multiple arguments across the web. Another element is that we recognize many societies, many large publishers will want to run their own annotation services, and so providing some means of federating annotation data sets or data stores, as we call them, is really essential. So as a user, how do I turn on what I want to see when I'm interacting with material? And scholars particularly have very different profound persona as a researcher, as a scholar, as a lab manager, and so forth. So this is just a simple mock-up by one of our partners, Jay Cartnell and Fred Chasen at Berkeley, on what that would look like in the Chrome settings that many of you may be familiar with already. So, this is an imaginary screen, but it gives you a sense of what you might ultimately be able to do within a native browser context. Now, of course, in implementing annotation as a goal in a peer review context, we have the standard problem of who has the right to call the change. And we're all in situations where journals point to editors and editors point to authors and authors point to everybody else and say, it's not me, I'm waiting for this other person to do this. And so one of the things that we are looking for is trying to coalesce enough interest and energy into this so that we can all make these changes together and include as much participation as we can across the gamut of scholarly communication practice. So returning to that document, the annotation in that document was early Greek and translated best as "fool and knave, leave the old reading and do not change it." So here we have a 3rd century reviewer commenting on an early Christian text in a sentiment that I think many of us would find extremely familiar. So, another piece of this is just the behavioral support question. How will this be received? If it's easier to do a read-write web, who will take advantage of that? Will we see generational differences in scholars and editors, or will we see, point of career differences, early or late differences in willingness to comment publicly or privately in these kinds of engagements? So I'm stealing a quote from Michael Magoulias of University of Chicago Press here, but this is the fear that there are, as he says, some users who hear tablet and immediately think cuneiform, And so obviously, there will be a group of users who will not take to this kind of interaction. But the flip side, the opportunity is expressed here by Bob Stein of the Institute for the Future of the Book, where he expresses this vision. There will be a time when people say, I don't ever want to read a difficult book alone again. And so that sentiment is in essence that annotation, that this ability to comment, to engage online on the web is so integral to people's experience of the network that they will take it for granted or start assuming that they will have an ability to have a conversation with the materials that are being published and that they're reading or even contributing to. So at Hypothesis, we've been trying to group together key elements and work to foster this dialogue to move us all forward. So recently we were awarded a large grant from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to advance our investigations of annotation in scholarly communication. Our partners in that work are eLife Sciences, Archive at Cornell, and the American Geophysical Union. So we're actually holding this next month a peer-reviewed design meeting, or charrette, in which we're inviting a wide range of experts in this area, commentators in peer review practices, such as John Unsworth, who's currently the CIO at Brandeis, Kathleen Fitzpatrick at MLA, as well as many of the publishing platforms, several large publishers, some individual scholars, and gather people together. Also, I would note some funders, such as the NSF and NEH, in order to drive this conversation of how we can move forward and do better with peer review, do better with review, and improve online commentary. So the results of this meeting will be released, obviously, publicly, and through them, we hope we will be able to chart some real directions in experimenting with annotation online. And that's it. Thank you very much.